Welcome to Law Subscribed. This is your dedicated news source for all things subscriptions in the law. My name is Matthew Kurbis. I'm the subscription attorney, and I believe subscriptions can help bridge the access to justice gap and incentivize attorneys to modernize and scale their practice like never before. On this show, I interview lawyers ditching the billable hour and experts who can help attorneys move beyond billing time. Thanks to my sponsors, 650 and Gavel. Links to both in the show notes. More on them later, and use the code LAWSUBSCRIBED when signing up. You get 10% off, and it supports the show. The best way to support the show is to share it with someone you know. This podcast is for educational and entertainment purposes only, and nothing said is legal, ethical, or financial advice. Without further delay, here's the episode. I'm thrilled to have with me today on Law Subscribed, Bill Pierznik. Welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks for having me, Matthew.
So, Bill, I learned about you through Cheryl Griffin's Legal Tech Guide. I was just skimming it, but I saw that you were doing something super innovative, and that was many months ago at this point in time. So I'm thrilled to see what you're doing now. But just in case my audience hasn't come across your stuff or your thought leadership on LinkedIn, give yourself a little introduction.
Sure. I've been practicing law for about 25 years. Started during the boom, internet boom, first internet boom with Cooley in Palo Alto. So I rode the boom, rode the bust. Was there for four-ish years, and then moved up to where I live now, which is Portland, Oregon, and kind of spent the last 20 years or so at a couple of firms or at another firm. Then I had my own law firm for a while, and then spent the last 10 years inside of companies that's in-house legal, and then moving slowly into other areas like corporate development, business development. Eventually ran sales for a while. I was chief operating officer of a $40 million SaaS business, and most recently CEO of a small little startup that we sold about a year ago, and then started this firm that I'm working at now, June of last year.
Fascinating. I mean, there's so many ways we could go with this, because the in-house thing, that's interesting because you were, I mean, at Cooley, I know you were billing your time, right?
Yeah, for sure.
And then moving from billing time to going in-house, where now you're hiring lawyers who are billing their time.
Yeah.
That totally shifts up the dynamic. Talk about that experience of going from billing your time to in-house and then having to hire these firms now that were billing time.
Yeah, I think so. It was first, I think everybody's first foray from billing time into an in-house role is like, oh my God, I'm never going to bill time again. This is amazing. Like, you don't have to spend all that time at the end of the day. So I had that sort of nirvana period early on. And then even when I had my own firm, we were, this was, mid 2000s, we were always trying to get people on fixed fee. Well, we weren't calling it subscription model then, but it was like, we were trying to get fixed fees across the board for everybody for all the reasons you talk to all of your guests about. And I've listened to your podcast often. So I know, it just, the incentives aren't aligned. You're pushing sort of, duration rather than quality, et cetera, et cetera. And so when I got on board at my first firm, and every firm that I hired as corporate counsel, we tried to get them onto some type of monthly subscription model. And it was usually for the corporate work. It's for a lot of the standard corporate work, like option agreements. And we were a public company. After we were public, it was like the 34 Act stuff. Like, I can put a box around that stuff. And so I was pushing those firms. And these are big, AmLaw 50 firms to be on subscription models. And some of them were good with it, and some of them felt like, we were just trying to take advantage of them in some way. And it's funny, we'll get to this later, but I feel like whoever's pitching the concept of fixed fee, the other side always feels like, what are you trying to do? What are you trying to pull over on me? So now I'm on the other side as the attorney trying to pitch fixed fee, and now the clients are like, what are you trying to pull over on us? So it was a good experience though, because the most important part of that tenure during in-house was what I learned by watching our in-house engineering teams operate and how they operate with Kanban boards and prioritizations and ticketing systems. These are all tech companies. And so when I thought about building this new law firm, the idea was, well, subscription models are great, but they're way better from a margin perspective if you can actually leverage the technology and process approach that these engineering teams that I was working for was using. And so that was probably the biggest lesson I had over those 10 years in terms of what took me into building macro.
I mean, I'm happy to go out of order from the normal conversation on these podcasts.
Sure.
So let's pull on that thread of, you've been in-house asking for subscription, and you've been subscription outside counsel begging your in-house counsel to let them hire you on subscription. Why do you think that is? That they think, whichever side it's on, they think you're trying to pull one over?
human nature. It's, it's outside the norm. It's particularly in our space. I think obviously becoming more and more common today, but it's still a pretty untested, not untested. It's pretty. It's not the majority in terms of business model. And so I think that anytime it's human nature to, hey, we've done this. I've done this way. I'm a CFO. I've paid for legal services for 30 years, always by the hour, unless it's financing, and then I do that fixed fee or not to exceed. And now you're coming at me with something that's different. So I have to understand why you want to do this, because if you want to do, if this was not going to be better for you, you would have stuck with the billable hour, Mr. Lawyer. So this must be better for you, which means if it's better for you, it's probably worse for me. So I think it's almost like a reactionary, not necessarily a rational reaction to it. And I think the way to combat that is we're brutally transparent with people, and are willing to work with people and say this isn't what we lock in on day one may not be what we are on day 180, but it's not us trying to pull one over on you. It's just us trying to get cost certainty on both sides.
Right. I wonder if one of the problems is just the focus on the thing that you're talking about, right? So like I see this is true also in how we like address problems in the healthcare industry, where it's like we don't have a healthcare industry, we have a sick care. We wait until people are sick and then we help them. It's like, okay, you have the wound. Now let's help treat the wound, as opposed to how did you like go upstream? How did you get the wound? How could we
Right.
avoid getting the wound? Same thing with the legal
Right.
profession. We do a lot of solving legal problems, not avoiding legal problems, which of course the subscription model works really well on.
Right.
So I wonder if like there's just like we're all focused on like what is the thing. So okay, we're talking about pricing. Then let's talk about pricing. Well, why are you doing subscription or you're not doing billing by the hour? Like you said, wouldn't it be better for you if you were billing by the hour? That's why then you'd want to do that instead. Well, like so what I'm thinking about is I'm thinking like more upstream before you even get to the pricing. Well, like what are all the other ancillary things around the billable hour? It's, how we have to manage our team, how you have to manage your team, because now we have to think about, okay, now we got to review attorney bills. The
Right.
attorneys don't like making the timesheets, and the in-house teams don't like having to review and analyze and cut down the timesheets. Let's eliminate that. Like, I almost wonder
Yeah.
if you start the sales approach for in-house teams of like we all hate like reviewing timesheets. Let's come up with a way that we could eliminate timesheets. So you don't come in and you're like, subscription, this is how we're going to solve this problem. It's like, no, we're going to go upstream. No more timesheets. All the time that your team spends reviewing timesheets, that whole department, like I'm thinking insurance companies, that whole department, you're investing millions of dollars to pay people to go through and software to analyze timesheets, you immediately have a savings on that, right? Like I got to
Yeah.
imagine like go upstream and we could solve these problems. What do you think about that?
100%. I think you're tapping into what's the business reason to do this outside financial, right? So I'll give you an example. One of our ICPs are companies who are kind of Series B to pre and house legal counsel, right? So maybe 50, 60 million in revenue. We primarily work with tech companies. In those situations, it's the CFO or the COO who's typically managing legal, right? So what happens is their sales team gets the contract, sends it to the CFO, they send it to us. In the typical model, it's like the CFO or their team is the bottleneck, right? And so meanwhile, the sales team is like, hey, we got quarter in, we need to get this done. Oh, okay, sitting with the finance team. The finance team doesn't want to let us loose to go talk to the sales team because they feel like, oh, the rates are going to get jacked up. Because if legal's talking to sales, they're going to call them all the time. And next thing you know, we have the surprise legal bill. So that's one of the things that we talk to when we're pitching this concept is, hey, like you can turn us onto your sales team. It's not going to cost you anything more. You have a fixed cost, right? So not only are you going to get better service, number one, number two, we're going to get closer to your team. So we're going to understand how they work. We're going to understand how the product works. And then number three, you're not going to be the bottleneck. So all these deals that are coming up at the end of the quarter, we're going to be helping shepherd those through at the same pace as the sales team. And you won't be the person that we have to keep going through in the middle
Right.
to slow things down.
Right. Right. With that example that you just gave, right? This is a startup. They don't have an in-house legal team.
Right.
And,
Right.
but obviously it sounds like you also serve clients that have like an in-house legal team. And I wonder which one is easier to explain this to or convince, because, the in-house attorney, they might have been a billable hour attorney, or if they're one of those rare birds that they started in-house and they've only ever been in-house, well, then they learned from the other in-house lawyers that this is how outside counsel bill. And so it's kind of all they've ever known. So I have to imagine it might be easier to sell, at least in my experience, it is like sell my legal services to a company that doesn't have an in-house team because they don't have the same functional fixedness.
Totally, 100%. And that's where talking to the CFO, he or she loves this model because they can budget for it. Like,
Mhm.
hey, I'm going to spend 48 grand next year, but all of our contracts are going to be negotiated, right? And so the question is, can you put if you can put a scope around it? So typically what we like to do subscription on is SaaS contracts. So sales contract, partnership agreements, maybe vendor agreements, that type of thing, because we know how to do it. We've been doing it for 55 years as a team. We can do it like the back of our hand. We have playbooks. So we kind of build out processes on the back end. So that stuff we can come up with a scope on, and we can pitch that. And it's way easier because our buyer is typically the person who's holding the financial strings in the company. So they love the fact that we can come in and say, you don't have to worry about, this fluctuating cost in your budget for next year. You don't have to put a pin in it. You can actually, hard code it in for this type of service for the year.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, speaking of playbooks, I've been playing around with a tool. At the time of recording, I already did the interview, but it might air after this one with a company, screens.ai, where it's basically like you program in your playbook. And then an AI like will analyze the contract according to your playbook just to give you like sort of thumbs up, thumbs down. They're working on actual redrafting and redlining and on the roadmap. But like, so that's top of mind for me. But like,
Yeah.
are you otherwise utilizing these playbooks and automations that are out there in AI to like get to the end result faster?
Yeah. So when we pitch it to our clients, we don't talk about it so much unless if they're an AI company and they want to kind of geek out with what we're doing on the back end, sure. But for the most part, that's kind of I view kind of the technology and automations. There's two different types. There's the internal stuff that you're doing, like how do you wire up the firm internally? And then what tools are you using for, say, work deployment, like the services you're providing to your clients? And so we're playing with both. I agree with you. The AI stuff, it's interesting. A lot of it's really, I know you had the guys from Paxton on a couple of weeks ago. I know those guys pretty well. One of their co-founders here in Portland. Like that kind of AI is really interesting, really cuts down the time in terms of legal research. I think looking at things like, hey, here's a contract, here's a red line, here's a playbook, generate me a suggested red line. It's not there yet, but it'll get there at some point. And so we're not relying so much on that today in terms of services deployment to the clients. What we've done is kind of build out playbooks internally per client. So when we onboard a client, we spend a lot of time. We want a product demo. We want to see your insurance. We want to have a conversation with you about where you sit on the spectrum of speed to risk aversion, right? Every client somewhere on there, so that we can get a flavor for how you want to do deals. And then we build a playbook off of your form and your fallbacks. And then we have an internal team when we get the red line in, that's basically doing that sort of red line work before the attorneys kind of do the QA and push it back out to the client. So we're leveraging playbooks now manually, but we're setting it up in a way where kind of when the robots are ready, we'll be able to kind of slot the robots in to actually do that review work for us.
Yeah. So while we're talking about technology, and I think that's really an interesting way you're thinking about internal tools versus external tools, right? Because even how
Yeah.
I'm thinking about using AI, just AI, I think there's very different use cases for internal versus external, right? What's some of the other, whether it's AI or not, what's some of the other technology that you're using? Then you could name off the shelf tools. You could talk about any proprietary tech that you're using too.
Yeah. Yeah. So when we started Macro, our whole focus was how do we become a technology-enabled law firm? You're hearing a lot now about technology-enabled services businesses. And so that was kind of what we wanted to build. We wanted to operate like a technology company, not only how we approach things, but also how do we use people, process, and technology to make things faster and more efficient. Like I said, we're using some stuff in the client services component of legal services today. Not a ton though, because it's not until it's trustworthy. We're using it for like basic research. We use some of the Thomson Reuters tool sets for legal research and the like, and there's some AI components to that. We use Paxton as when we have to do some legal research. What we pivoted to though was how do we operate the internal systems? And I would call that less AI and more automation, right? So AI is this big, sexy word, but when you actually look where a lot of the efficiencies that people could gain today, it's not generative AI. Like it'll maybe get there, but it's really like, what are you doing today? What are the monotonous processes that you're doing today over and over and over again? And how do you get automation to actually do that for you? And so we're doing a few things there. We had a tool set in-house. We're a Microsoft shop. We had a tool set in-house. We had a product called Acello that we brought in that was not designed for law firms. It was designed more for professional services organizations. What we're looking at now is actually custom building. We hired a group out of Italy, actually, who who do automations as a service. And these guys are helping us build basically a super lightweight custom backend on top of Airtable so that we can do a lot with the data. And what we've discovered, and that, being 10 years in-house, buying SaaS platforms, I think everybody on this call knows this. You buy software, and a lot of it's great software, but you end up using 20% of it, 30% of it. And then it doesn't exactly always do with what you want. And so you're kind of running into some dead ends here and there. And so we've decided we're going to customize our backend in terms of the timekeeping, ticketing systems, and billing with this new Airtable product that'll then tie into QuickBooks, and then it'll also tie into SharePoint. And then we're also doing some really interesting things around client onboarding and engagement. So an example is, this is a Zoom call. If this is the client pitch, at the end of there'll be words in the invite that call it potential representation or something. At the end of the Zoom meeting, I'll get a Slack bot that'll pop up and say, hey, how'd the call with Matthew go? Should we send an engagement letter? And I'll say, yes, here's the email, here's the services, standard rates, and I hit enter. And that kicks off a workflow that sends you an engagement letter. I collect all the data I need for my CRM. I collect your financial information for ACH. And then I bring all that back in. That populates my CRM, populates QuickBooks, and it sets up all the file structures in SharePoint, and no human has to touch it. And the nice thing about that is we don't have to hire as many admins as you typically would in a law firm. And so we're able to keep, when we do the billable rate stuff, which we still do some of that, we're able to keep the rates lower because you don't have a whole team of people that have to be there to support the client onboarding.
We're going to table that conversation on why you're still doing billable stuff to later in the interview. So let's talk a little bit about, and by the way, the Airtable thing, you're not the first lawyer who's like doing something on top of Airtable. I mean, it's an incredibly powerful thing if you could leverage it. Jess Birkin comes to mind. So like, maybe this was that you worked at a SaaS business, but maybe it was even before that. Like what was your origin process on adapting the subscription model to legal services? Like I know it's never just like one aha moment, but like what brought you to that?
Yeah, I think it was a couple things. I think early on when I had my own law firm in the mid 2000s, I had to go, there was a number of platforms. There was one called Serengeti. I was working with some large Fortune 50 companies, and there was a billing platform where you had to send in all of your bills, and it had to, conform to their data structure so that they could see on the back end, they could do data analyzation around their law firms and who was doing what in capacity and billing rates and the like. And I was really interested in that. I mean, it was a pain in the butt from a service provider perspective because you had to square peg and round hole your stuff into there. But I started thinking around, well, Serengeti has all this really interesting data. And then I started talking to law firms when I was in-house. And I would say to these firms, like, why don't you just come to me with a flat fee to do all of my legal work every year? Like, me, like we just went public last year. We're $120 million SaaS business. We're not in a regulated industry. You can ask 15 questions. How many countries are you in? Regulated industries, right? How do you handle data, et cetera, et cetera? And, based on that, you should be able to put that into your historical billing system and say, oh, on average, we're Wilton Sonsini or Cooley. We've represented these companies, and on average, they pay $320,000 a year for legal fees. Great. We take out patent litigation and we take out, M&A, company M&A. Why don't you come to me with that concept? You guys have all the data. And so this was like 2011, 2012. I was talking to these firms about, and I mean, that sounds really simple. It's really hard because that data is not structured in a lot of ways. Now it's becoming more structured, but back then it wasn't. And so that was kind of the initial thing I started thinking about is like, why can't you have cost certainty around this? because the knowledge of what the costs have been historically is there. It just matter how you get at the data. And so that was part of it. And then part of it was, I know what I'm paying you guys every month for this type of work, trademark work or corporate work. Let's just get cost certainty on both sides. And it was just more of a matter of when I went in-house, when anybody, the first time you go in-house and you're running the legal team, the CFO comes to you and says, what do you think it's going to cost us for legal next year? And you're like, I don't know. And you start having to like pick these things out and you get it wrong. Like I got wildly wrong my first year. And then, so then the second year I was like, okay, I need to start getting aggressive about this. And so that was, I was it was both sort of operational and visionary, maybe a little bit, but then also practical and like, hey, I'm not going to get yelled at for being over budget again.
Right. Right. Oh, really interesting. What do you think that is like unique about you that like you unlike so many other lawyers, although all the lawyers we've had on the podcast, like I'm trying to find the through line of like do we share a common thread or, like about like what makes us special and unique that helps
Hmm.
us see the light, like is like let's ditch the billable hour. Is it just the entrepreneurial mindset? I mean, certainly I don't think we've gotten any cog in the machine lawyers that have come on the podcast that were like
Right.
I can't build
Right.
time. So maybe it's just that it's mostly been women and attorneys of color that they haven't been able to advance in big law because of the
Mm,
institutional problems there, so they leave and they're like, why not just do it my own way? A couple of white men here, like
yeah.
what's special about it? Like I know I'm a little neurodivergent, maybe that's the entrepreneur brain. Like what is it, do you think, that like helped you? Was it your upbringing? Do you have lawyers in the family? Maybe you're a first
Yeah.
generation lawyer. Like what do you think?
No. Yeah.
No,
No. First generation lawyer, first generation in college.
so
I
that could be
think
it.
it's
Yeah.
maybe that's it. So you use the word entrepreneurial mind, maybe there's a big Venn diagram that's actually an eclipse on this, which is the curious mind. Like
Yeah.
why are we doing it this way? Right? Like
Yeah.
why things have always been done this way. Well, that's the way they've always been done. Well, why? Right? And you start pulling on the thread, and what you realize is, well, sometimes there's a there, and you're like, oh, okay, that totally makes sense. And then other times, like the billable hour, like maybe it made sense at one point, but it wasn't always that way. And we went to the billable hour, and now, and so when you start questioning, and then you put on top the legal mind of like questioning things, and then where's the rationale behind this? Maybe that it. The combination of being a little bit entrepreneurial, really, really curious, and then having the rational brain to be aggressive enough to kind of poke holes in things and be willing to say, no, that's wrong. Like, no, we're going to try it a different way.
Right. Right. And this has been at the time of recording, I don't know if any episodes have actually talked about this, but I feel like there's something about the lawyer mind, like you said, like the legal problem solving training that we get in law
Yeah.
school and in practice, where if even for the non-entrepreneurial lawyers out there, if you said billing time unethical,
Right.
prohibited, you have
Right.
no other choice, what are you going to do? Like I feel
Right.
like a lot of lawyers would actually come up with some really great solutions, but we're
That's
not
right.
seeing it. Right? When I went solo, I pivoted from mostly litigation to a transactional only practice. I did not have a database of documents to automate. That's why a business and employment legal document database and automation tool like 650 is super useful. I can rely on the quality of the documents in 650's database since they're putting excellent legal minds to work curating and updating their documents and automations over time. When you're not billing by the hour, outsourcing and efficiency matters, and 650 can help you scale your practice to get high quality documents drafted in less time. Use the code LAWSUBSCRIBED at 650.com and when being onboarded to get 10% off. If you're not a business and employment attorney or you have your own documents that you'd prefer to use, then my next sponsor, Gavel, is the automation tool for you. Gavel allows you to build shareable, client-facing workflow and document automations. In other words, Gavel helps you create a legal practice where attorneys can monetize the value they bring clients in productized form and scale via subscriptions and flat fees. Use the code LAWSUBSCRIBED at gavel.io to get 10% off an annual subscription. There's no one right way to automate and scale your practice, but with one or both of my sponsors, 650 and Gavel, you can take your subscription law firm to the next level. Links to both in the show notes. Now back to the show.
That's right. No, but you're right. And that just sparked in my mind, like all of us have been around clients who either about us or about others complain about the legal bill and are surprised and complain about the size of the legal bill. And so there's a difference though, when people hear that, when lawyers hear that, they're going to have one of a few different responses. One response is they feel bad about it. Oops, sorry, whatever. Another response could be, sorry, that's what it's worth. The other response is there's an opportunity here. That's a pain point, right? So how do you go out and attack a pain point? And that's the entrepreneurial mind, which is there's a problem presented, and instead of just treating the problem as always been there, think about how can I solve that problem for this client of mine?
Another potential through line is, and this I haven't actually had a chance to ask anybody about this yet. So you're the first one, Bill. Is so much of us are either we're firm owners, or we left, or we started our own thing, or we went partnered with another lawyer to start an innovative model. I wonder, like, do you consider yourself like a generalist or a jack of all trades, or like you're not just like good at the singular one thing? There might be 3 or 5 things that you think you're really good at. Like, does that apply to you?
Yeah, for sure. I think and also being in house, right? So as the GC, particularly of smaller companies, for a number of those companies, I was the only lawyer. So you are doing everything, right? So you're doing the contracts and the corporate work, and you're doing lightweight employment, and you're handling disputes. And so, yeah, the generalist mindset definitely. Generalist. I enjoy being the generalist, frankly, because you get to see more stuff. It's way more interesting.
And you can see how everything connects, which helps you do your job
Yeah,
better.
that's right. That's right. That's right. And I think it also ties into the subscription model in the sense of you understand the bigger picture, and you understand, like, I think the generalist understands, maybe your listeners gonna, or, get on me for this, but I think being a generalist, you tend to understand the business side of things a little bit more. Maybe that's being the GC where you're part of the business. I don't know, but a lot of these ideas that I come up with are from how do I make the recipient of my services, who's a business person, how do I solve their problems? They still have to have legal advice, but how do I get it to them in a better way?
And even, is there other good business advice that I could give that's related to the legal advice? And the legal
Yeah,
advice might change and shift depending on the business advice. And you just, if you're only able to bill for legal advice and you're only thinking about that, you're not thinking about
totally,
all the other things, all the other value.
totally, 100%. And this happened. I had a call this morning with someone in London who we're on a subscription model with her company, and we were talking about things that were well outside of the legal space, and it was just about how they're going to be managing independent contractors, not legally, but just functionally, like how is this going to work? And if I was billing time, we probably talked for 25 minutes on that. If I was doing a billable hour with her, I would have felt bad about billing that time. But on the other hand, my time is valuable and not giving out good value here. So the subscription model allows you to show up holistically and advise holistically in a way that the billable hour just doesn't.
Absolutely. I have a business client who a similar sort of a thing, totally different context, but similar situation where she came to me. She employs some people, and at least in Illinois, she doesn't pay them enough that a non-solicitation would be an enforceable agreement.
Mhm.
And this is totally common for this particular industry. And this was a recent law that changed like a year or two ago in Illinois, but she didn't know that. And the attorney she used to use is like basically retired. And so we're problem solving this because we can't just keep using the same employment agreement that has this non-solicitation clause. And so one of
Right.
the solutions to that is, well, let's come up with like a customer retention incentive sort of a thing. So yeah, sure, they could take your customers and leave with them, but what can we come up with a way that we could incentivize them to stay working for you and keep their customers with the business? And that's a creative solution we were able to come up with, which mostly came from me because I'm trying to help her get the same outcome, but in a different legal way. But like, that's not
Right.
like a legal thing. The legal thing is, okay, I'm going to draft the agreement for the incentive plan that's otherwise compliant. If I just
Right.
wait until my client comes to me for that,
Right.
that then it might never come, and I don't get paid for that work. But on the subscription model, I get to do that work. The client's happy, they stay subscribed, and
Yeah.
then lifetime value, right? So,
Yeah. Right.
yeah, I think there's really something there. So let's now talk about how you're still, well, even before we get into the billing time thing, I really want to talk about that. But the more important is, let's talk about your model then. So let's talk about, so you're using subscription, and this will lead into timekeeping. You're using subscription. Like, I don't see the pricing on the website, which, not everybody's going to do that. But like, how are you using it? How do
Yeah.
you come up with pricing? Is it custom? Do you have ideas like an Airtable? You have tier 1, 2,
Yeah.
3. Like, talk about that.
Yeah. So I'll talk about it for, I think we've really nailed the subscription model for this one specific use case, which is these SaaS contracts, sales contracts. So in that world, what we do is we have examples that we talk to clients about, and we show them the examples, and think about it as the matrix, right? And so on one axis is number of deals you actually have on average, say per month or per quarter. And on the other axis is the complexity, right? So if you have 5 deals a month and your software, your product is super simple and it doesn't have to go through procurement, there's not a lot of data, it's just bought by the chief marketing officer. And sometimes there's red lines, but they're pretty straightforward. Okay, that's going to be one price versus, oh, we do 10 or 15 deals a month and we're handling HIPAA data and we have international clients, right? So okay, so that's a different place on the matrix in terms of the cost. So we kind of customize the fee per client. And what we like to do is start off by doing about a quarter's worth of time, maybe sometimes even 2 quarters of just basically do kind of either do a discounted hourly rate during that period of time, or we just give a thumb in the air flat fee during that time. So we can see, okay, you gave us the numbers and we understand the product, but let's see how the team really flows. Like, let's see how quickly do you guys need turns? Where do you guys sit on the spectrum of speed to risk aversion? Because I've been at clients where it's like, we don't care, get the deal done. And I've been at other clients, which is we will walk from a deal if there's uncapped liability on anything. Where do you guys fall on that, right? And people will tell you, oh, we're kind of in the middle. Well, that's not helpful, right? So it's really helpful to go through, a few months at least of kind of understanding what happens. And then we meet with the buyer. So in our world, in these situations, a lot of times the buyer could be the JC, could be a CFO, could be a COO. And we basically map out and we say, look, based on these past few months, here's the number that we suggest. And what we suggest is we're going to do this for 3 months, and then we're going to come back and revisit it. And what I've always found historically is the people freak out the first time they feel like they didn't get the full legal time for the amount you billed them. And so you got to say, like, look, this is a long-term thing. We're not trying to monetize any one transaction or any 1 month. This is like, how do we monetize the relationship over the course of time? And if one side's not happy with the model after 3 or 6 months, it's probably not because the model's wrong. It's probably because the number's wrong. So let's see, should we adjust the number up or down so that the client feels like they're getting value out of the subscription, and we on our side feel like we're getting value for the time that we put in. So it's a little bit of a cut. That's why we don't have it on the website. We kind of custom build it for the client based on who they are, how big they are they public, are they private, et cetera.
Right. And I mean, look, I do custom pricing, even though I list pricing on my website. Sometimes, not every, in a professional industry, not every single client is going to fit into a box. And there's different philosophical approaches there. I know some attorneys use a subscription where they say that's what the tiers are for. You either, if you're not maximizing, tier 2 benefits, and then all of a sudden you're exceeding them, you got to go up to tier 3, whether or not you're maximizing them or not. So just a different philosophical approach. And there's simplicity to that. My business model, I think, is flexible, and I like that, but I could appreciate some lawyers might want you're in tier 1, 2, or 3. And it depends on however many things, right?
I also think, I think it depends, like, who are your clients, right? So if you're selling to consumers, you're selling to individuals or real small mom and pop businesses, you might be able to have that, like, here's fixed fee flat pricing. It's right on the website. It's very transparent. As you go up market and you're dealing with more sophisticated buyers, I think it's hard to shoehorn everybody into a few different tiers. I would love if we could do that. Maybe we can get that at some point, but we're at macro. We're not there right now.
Right. As you collect data, you might be able to
as we collect data. Sure. Yeah.
Right. Which brings me back to the billable stuff. So when you're tracking time, for example, in these, like, before you price it situations, you go into it with the intention of transitioning, at least in these types of deals, from time billing to subscription. So that there's purpose there. I wonder how easy or difficult that those transitions can be sometimes, where like you talk about it with them ahead of time. We're gonna get a sense of this, then it's gonna be on subscription. But they're like, no, just keep billing us. Like, do you ever get that kind of a thing?
No, because we're pretty transparent about it up front. And again, when we're selling to an economic buyer, they're kind of interested in it for the cost certainty aspect, right?
Mhm.
So we have very few people who's like, you know what? I'd love to be surprised by your legal fees. Like keep up the, the billable hour amount. What we end up having, what the discussion we end up having is, hey, we thought it was going to be $4,000 a month. I know we talked about that when we started, but based on, these 3 months we did, it probably should be $3,000 a month. And we're like, okay, great. Let's look at the data. So it's less about keep staying with the billable hour, and it's more around maybe adjusting the numbers or the number of deals that we put in as part of the package. So we will say, like, for $4,000 a month, we'll do 10 of your deals. And then anything on top of that is a la carte. So maybe we adjust that number up or down as well. So it's more about playing with the factors than it is changing the model.
Right. And that sounds more like my model, which is if you go outside the scope
Yeah,
of the subscription, that's what my a la carte pricing is for. Now we're going to do a
right.
la carte, right? And if you do that
That's right.
enough, go up to the next subscription tier, or we could do a custom package, right?
Correct. Yeah.
Um, although I like, here's the thing is like, I wonder like if you're tracking your time, and I'm poking holes, so you tell me, right?
Totally. Yeah.
If I'm tracking my time to get to that, what that subscription would be, I'm still thinking about my time, right? How long things are taking. I'm less incentivized during that period to just get stuff done as fast as possible, as effective and efficient as possible. And then once I have the subscription pricing, I am incentivized to like be even faster and more
Yeah.
efficient, right? So like I still see a misalignment there. Like, what do you think about that?
I think that's theoretically true. I think that's where we've solved that with the people that we've brought into the firm, right?
Hmm.
So the people that my partner and I, and the two other people that we are working with have all worked in-house inside of companies. And all of us understand the need to get things done on a speedy turnaround time for clients. And so, yes, I can see theoretically how the starting off with the billable hour keeps the risk incentives there. It's not our goal though. Like we're trying to
Yeah.
build a law firm that has this as one of its core features, core tenets. And so we know, frankly, we're leaving money on the table sometimes when we move to subscription, but that's okay because we're doing it. We're not even building a better mousetrap. We're asking like, why do we have the mousetrap in the first place? So I think we've solved that so far. Now scaling will be different. When we scale, how do we bring in people and think about it the right way? And maybe we pay those people, the people who are doing that work. Maybe we're checking their time, but maybe we're paying them as a flat rate internally as resources. I don't know. But right now we've solved that problem through the characters of the people that we brought in. We've all been GCs before.
Right, right. I think the way you handle that when you scale is just a guess, because I'm a true solo with no plans to grow, is you handle it like the engineers handled product development, right? It's like you don't need to track their time. You just need to have quick stand-up meetings. Hey, how far along are you on this project? What are your impediments? What could I do to remove those impediments? And like
Yeah,
and like just do those, and just to get them there faster, right? That
totally.
that that would be my recommendation anyway, though I have no data to back that up, Bill.
Well, that's why we're building it. Yeah, no, but you're 100% right. That's why we're building a ticketing system on the back end, right? So you
Mhm.
think about the difference between a Jira support ticket and a red line from a project allocation standpoint is really nothing. So if I can build a ticketing system, then I can see who has capacity and who can I give this, not how much time are they building, how much capacity do they have, and what do I think that they need per contract to get things done.
Right, right. I forgot to ask is if you know, like what is the software you're using to actually like get the recurring payments? Are they sending a check every month? Like what are they doing?
Yeah. So right now it's just through QuickBooks. We have basically QuickBooks. We're invoicing them right now through QuickBooks, but as part of this custom build, we're going to be trying to build a subscription engine on the back end.
Right. So that could be automated because that's a hassle invoicing
Yeah, that
QuickBooks.
can be automated. That's it. But we're also finding, again, every client's a snowflake in a way, particularly as you get to these bigger companies that have been around for a while. We're like, we don't do that. You've got to send us an invoice and then we've got to, send you a paper check. And it's like, okay. So, we can't, we're not big enough yet to force change in the market, but so we're trying to force it where we can and then work with clients, meet clients where they are.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, for me personally, I'm just like, if you're not going to put in your credit card or ACH information into the system, you're not a good fit for me. But that's just me.
I totally hear you. I think, again, it comes down to different clients operate differently.
Yeah, yeah. That was a really good example you gave earlier. It depends on your target market and the market you're actually serving, what you're going to build.
Correct.
So you're also doing just flat fee work.
Yeah, so we try to do flat fee wherever we can. I mean, sometimes like yesterday, I worked on a form agreement for a client for a new client, and it was, hey, how about this for the cost? And that sounds great. Let's do it. So we do quick little projects like that. We'll try to be on fixed fee, and then we do larger projects like M&A. We do financing work, formation work, all that stuff where we can kind of put a box, or we kind of generally know where we try to put fixed fees around it. So that's not subscription. Those are usually one-time buys.
So I don't talk too much about what I actually do on the podcast. For that, everyone should go to MatthewCurvis.com. But something that I do, and I'm curious to know your metric for that, or if you're just doing gut feelings on that, or if you have data to back it up, or how you calculate it. Like for me, it's just $50 a page, and like some pages are complicated and some pages are less complicated, but it's a really easy metric to understand. I know exactly what I'm making. The client knows exactly what they're spending, whether I'm analyzing it, drafting it, whatever, whether it's an automation or not. Because sometimes for certain automated documents, I charge less than 50 a page. I'll flat fee that work, prenups, simple estate plans, things like that. You only change a few things, right?
Yep.
But for other things, it's just $50 a page. And then for things like M&A transactions, I just do asset purchase agreements because I'm doing less than $1 million, a transaction, right? It's a subscription add-on. It's another, like, I think right now it's like $800 a month. As soon as that letter of intent goes out, $800 a month or is accepted, $8,800 a month goes on through closing, $800 a month goes off. And like, that's how I'm handling that sort of a thing. But what I'm doing, 800 might be too low for you, and $50 a page might be too low for you for the clients you're serving, Bill. But but for me, even just a flat rate per page, it scales incredibly well. It's easy to understand, and so like that's what I'm doing. Like what are you doing to price those flat fees?
So it's more of a combination of the 50 years we've had kind of doing this work together, where we have general internal guidelines around what, asking ourselves the same questions that I was talking about in terms of the matrix. How difficult is this type of work? How many pages? How many are there for an M&A deal? Not only like, are we talking about 400 employees that are getting bought by this company, or are there 3 employees? Are they overseas? And so we don't have enough data yet in our system to be able to come at that from a pure data perspective. So we're doing a little bit by the kind of gut feel, but we're also A/B testing everything right now.
Right.
So we try one M&A, flat fee we tried one based on value of the deal. We tried one based on just kind of, thumb in the air. We're kind of seeing how all this plays out. So we haven't picked the right model, the perfect model yet.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Because with the time tracking stuff, like that's a really unique take that you have of like you transition from time tracking. But for the other time tracking stuff, like I've got to wonder if there's a way you could just flat fee or temporary subscription price it, like I do with the temporary subscription add-ons, right? Like that's the way that I've tackled things that you just don't know because you're just not going to have the data on is subscription plus flat fee and subscription add-ons.
Yeah.
And like you do some combination of that, and it's an experiment. But your client, unlike the billable hour, even though you're experimenting, your client's going to know this is what it's going to cost. And if we go 6 months with this deal, this is what it's going to cost. And if it's 7 months, you're right. So like I still feel like there's ways to as long as you're willing to experiment. The next client that comes in the door, here's this thing, this flat fee plus subscription thing. That we normally would have done billable hours, or even better yet, and this is another Jess Birkin connection, give them a choice, A and B. You want billable hour, or you want this subscription plus flat fee thing to take care of this one-off transaction? See what they say?
No, 100%. I think the ability to do that for clients up front takes away what we were talking about before. What are you trying to pull over on me, right? You're like, okay, look, if you want to stick with this way, that's fine. And I think the other way, we have done that with a couple clients where, hey, look, during the first few months, we're going to charge you $5,000. And basically, there's got to be a relationship here with the client of trust, because if we say we're going to do it for $5,000 and then we end up incurring $15,000 worth of work, then there's a conversation with the client like, hey, this is not working out for us, right? And they decide to hold you to it. Well, like that's not really the spirit of this partnership, because guess what? If we said it was 10 grand and it was 1 grand and you came to us and say, this isn't really working out for us, we wouldn't say, oh, sorry, that's the way it is. It's like, there's got to be the mutual back and forth. And I think you as the service provider, your point around, in that lead-in period, if you are able to do kind of a lightweight or reduced subscription model, you could also just treat that as kind of investment and a loss leader, right? So I'm getting the buy-in, because what we haven't talked about is once you get these clients on a subscription model, I don't know about your experience, but our experience is they're pretty sticky. Like they don't really go away because they like what they have. If you're doing, as long as you're doing good work and you're being responsive and you're doing all the things that a lawyer, that your competitors would theoretically be doing, but you're doing it at a subscription rate, it's going to be really hard for them to want to pry you away.
And that's in part because they didn't like doing all the legal stuff on their own and waiting to call their lawyer to the last minute, because that's when the clock starts running, right?
That's right.
So once they people don't realize, and like small business owners especially, like don't realize all the legal stuff that's happening in their life, in their business, and if you are a startup company, like also you're a co-founder, you're wearing the legal hat too, right?
Totally, 100%.
Whether you think about it or not. And so as soon as we come in, I agree with you. It's very sticky because it's like, oh, I'm just going to send this contract or this issue over to the fractional legal counsel that we've hired.
Right.
Why not?
That's right. That's right.
And it's not costing me anything more. In fact, I want to maximize my subscription benefits.
That's right. That's right. And
yeah, go ahead.
I was going to say, we like to tell people, like, this gives you the ability to think of us as your in-house counsel, right? So if that was a project and you had legal counsel, would you walk down the hall metaphorically and hand it to your GC and have her take a look at it? If the answer is yes, then yeah, that's what we want to be able to do.
Right. And, it's like one of those things where if I'm not watching Netflix, why am I subscribed to Netflix? I'm going to unsubscribe. Right. So like, but when you get that charge every month or whatever it is, that invoice, then like, you're like, well, I've already paid. I might as well maximize my subscription benefits. And even like a business like Costco, well, if you don't shop enough there, like to like pay for your annual fee, like they're just going to refund you to avoid that churn sort of a thing too. Well, maybe you'll do it again here next year because they want to keep you subscribed, but they want you to, be a happy user of the subscription model that they have. Another thing is I want to know about how you're handling multi-jurisdictional related practice, because it sounds like you're representing clients even overseas. So how do you have a primarily federal-based practice? It sounds like it's just like general counsel-based work. How do you gel with like multi-jurisdictional and UPL laws?
Yeah. So to be clear, the client wasn't based overseas. I was talking to one of the client's employees who's living in London right now. The client's in the US. So we're primarily a business law firm, right? So we do kind of soup to nuts on the business side, and we do a lot of commercial transactions. So we're not handling a lot of state-specific issues around litigation. And if we are handling things that are state-specific, whether they be litigation-based or employment-based, we've got a team of kind of solos and small firm practitioners that we bring in to help with those expertise areas.
Yeah. I still haven't gotten them on the pod, but I did meet a lawyer who charges other lawyers to be local counsel on a subscription. Isn't that interesting?
That's interesting. Yeah, that is interesting.
Right. And so I don't know how maybe they haven't come on because that model didn't pan out, but it's an interesting idea.
It's an interesting idea for sure.
Yeah. Whether that's local, like counsel just for transactions, or I think he was doing it for court appearances. And it's like so many court appearances a month for whatever cases that you have. We'll take care of those court appearances for you. So interesting model. With that, talk to me about just one more substantive question for you here. Have you found that the clients who are more open to this are like institutional clients that have hired legal counsel before, or more like latent legal market where maybe they didn't hire counsel before because they were too scared of the billable hour or they didn't know how much it was going to cost?
It's definitely clients who have been sophisticated buyers of legal services in the past, because they're the ones who have seen the pain points. And even within that, like we can see companies that have been around for a while, companies that are private equity backed versus venture backed, ones that are more focused on cost rather than, not more focused, but more focused on costs than those who are not. definitely are a bigger buyers of this type of service than those who are either late into it. A lot of the like latent companies, when we pitch this model, they're like, yeah, but what do you cost per hour? And we're like, okay, well, we can talk about that, which is fine, but that's just the traditional way they've always bought it. So usually it's the forward thinking people and a lot of the CFOs who are leaning in.
Yeah, I mean, I like even still, like when I think of latent legal market, I think of they don't even know what the billable hour is because they've never hired a lawyer before. So, like, do you have any of the? But seriously, it's the largest potential market for lawyers to serve. So,
Yeah,
have you had any of those clients sign up with the firm that have started a business and they've never hired a lawyer before?
sure. Yeah. And usually we're not starting off with a subscription because, you know, when you particularly if you form a tech company, there's a flurry of work at the beginning. And then it's like, okay, go prove this thing out and make sure it works and then come back. And so we're usually not doing subscription model here. That's where we're doing the fixed fee up front. Um, and so if that's what you meant by latent, then yes, absolutely. Those are first time founders. We're working with those people all the time. But those models tend not to, there's not a lot of recurring work, the first year of a company's life. Usually there's more project based stuff.
Right. Set up the company,
And
terms
then
and conditions, all
totally.
that
Yeah.
stuff, and yeah,
Operating agreement, option plan. And in those situations, those founders love this model because usually a lot of times they're trying to bootstrap it, right? And so
right.
they can come to us who have automated everything and we have half, our firm rates are about half what they are at the bigger firms, or they can go to a bigger firm and pay double and, get maybe the same amount of work, but there are much smaller fish in a much bigger pond.
Right. Yeah, I think there's a lot of opportunity there. And even they might be willing to pay something de minimis, Bill, just to keep Marco Law Group on call if they need to schedule a 15-minute call here or there. What's that worth? Even something like $100 a month. Like, let them schedule a 15-minute call with you because they might bring you more flat fee work, or you might be able to give them the piece of advice, legal advice that they needed. So in 6 months from now, business is booming and now they're paying you $5K a month. So like,
Right.
I think even something de minimis, so they could still just schedule a 15-minute call with you, right? Like something simple. I think you could leverage a de minimis subscription in that sort of circumstance. But with that, let me ask you the last question I ask all my guests, and that is a hot dog a sandwich and why?
Hmm. A hot dog is a sandwich. It's got two sides. I heard one of your guests before talk about the fact that it's not a sandwich because the hot dog's actually attached. The buns are actually attached to each other. I've had way too many situations in my life where that bun is no longer attached. And so I'm going to go with a sandwich, two pieces of bread, something in the middle, and it's just a different form.
All right, sounds good. If people wanted to get in touch with you, what's the best way for them to do that?
Sure. I'm on LinkedIn, Bill Pierznik, and then Macro Law Group is macrolg.com.
All right, great. Well, thanks so much for coming on the show.
Okay, thanks.
And that's our show. Thanks again to 650 and Gavel for being sponsors. The best way for others to discover this show is for you to share it with somebody you think would find value from it. Follow me on LinkedIn since that's where I'm most active on social media, and click the bell towards the top right of my profile to get notified about all of my posts about this podcast and everything else I think is valuable for you to see. To get in touch, message me on LinkedIn or email kurbis@lawsubscribed.com. All links are in the show notes. Until next time, this is Matthew Kurbis with Law Subscribed.